Thank you very much. And we'll invite Mr. McCarry. Paul, please, to give us a verbal update on place strategy, which is a very neat follow-on from where we've been. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So to update the board, you'll recall at the previous meeting, we introduced some of the work that we've been doing and some of the concepts around the development of the place strategy in Aberdeenshire, recognising the views that were expressed by the partners around the table. Or the virtual table today, we expanded a lot of our thinking on engagement, but also inclusion into the development of the strategy to the partners. So recognising that the Blue Light Services and obviously the NHS and the Health and Social Care Partnership obviously recognise the benefits of transitioning to place-based approaches, and also how we utilise and distribute our services and activities across Aberdeenshire. Not only creates an economy of scale, but it allows us to deliver on equity of accessibility to those essential services and facilities too. So following on from that, we invited the partners to a workshop with Scottish Futures Trust to talk through different place-based approaches and different strategies and how they've been developed across the country. And in addition to that, we ran in parallel, or are running in parallel, our expanded engagement process on the development of the place strategy in Aberdeenshire. So moving away from looking at council services to including partners, community planning partners, our communities and our elected members. The engagement process comes to an end on the 29th of June. Fiona will nod her head and confirm that. Fiona's led on the development of the engagement strategy. Thereafter, we'll hopefully pull everybody together, and we'll start to draft the strategy over the summer. And then into August, September, we will report to area committees before going through policy committee a little bit later than anticipated, probably heading towards October instead of September. But that's certainly the ambition, to develop the strategy, and noting that the delay in progress is down to the recognition that we needed to revise our engagement strategy and ensure that we had that programme of workshops with Scottish Futures Trust to make sure that we were aligned in terms of the vision that we want to create for place. So not just about the council, but equally making sure we're encapsulating the community ambition as well as our partners' ambition, and making sure that we're all signed from the same hymn sheet going forward. Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you very much indeed, Paul. And again, an awful lot of work going on around this particular aspect. So open to any questions for Paul. Whilst you're saying, Paul, it's going round area committees and within the council itself, are any of our partners taking it to their colleagues, and how's it being cascaded out through our partner organisations to get that feedback?
We're going to carry on the engagement process throughout the summer to make sure that everybody's feeding into the development of the policy strategy, and then thereafter, obviously, we'll have our own governance structure that we'll fulfil. But equally, I'm happy to carry on the conversations and work with other organisations in terms of moving through their governance if it is a policy that they want to endorse or adopt as well. But the conversations are ongoing.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. So hope partners are clear about that if you wish to engage further, and Paul's offering that engagement on a continuing basis. So please get in touch with Paul directly if you wish to have further discussions in your own organisations around all of that. And I presume the CPP executive will have the opportunity as well, Paul, to keep in touch. Yep. Through Mr. Simpson and yourself, I'm sure you'll be able to ensure that all partners are aware of the work and also of the timescales and the governance routes, so that if there are any issues, then partners have got a way in to get that addressed. Yeah, okay. Okay, I see no indications then, colleagues. So thank you very much indeed, Mr. Macari, for that. And we look forward to further reports coming forward at the appropriate time. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Item 6 on our agenda is reducing poverty, and that is one of our local outcome improvement priorities. And I wonder is Amanda on the call, Fiona, to take this?
I've just sent her a message, Chair. I don't know if you maybe want to do the health and well-being.
Yeah, we can do that.
First,
we can do that.
That's okay, wait for Amanda to come in.
Yes, because whilst Amanda couldn't attend the meeting today, she is going to present this paper. So, George, if it's all right, can I go to item 7 on our agenda, which is the health and well-being LOIP, and I'm pleased to welcome George Howie, our public health lead, to present this, please. Over to you, George. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, happy to provide an update on progress in relation to the health eating active living strand of the health and wellbeing LOIP priority. The board will be aware of the work that's taken place in relation to the development of the Aberdeenshire HEAL action plan. The action plan is something that's been co-developed by the HEAL Strategic Planning Group, which is a kind of multi-agency partner group that's overseen this process and has worked very closely with our communities across Aberdeenshire to develop the plan. And that community engagement process was led by our colleagues within community learning and development. Actually, it was a really worthwhile process, we found. The plan itself, as you'll be aware, consists of 4 key strategic themes: physical activity, food accessibility, improving mental health and well-being, and education and self-management. We have a kind of 5th theme, which really is a strand that runs through all of the other 4, which is a commitment to continue that community engagement as the plan develops and matures. So that under those 4 themes, we have a series of 35 actions. At an earlier stage in the process, we carried out a piece of mapping work to establish at that stage what the landscape looked like in terms of HEAL activity that we were aware of in Aberdeenshire. And in terms of the programmes of work and projects that we were aware of at that stage, it was very evident that the vast bulk of that work was work which was focusing on supporting individual behaviour change or individual lifestyle change. And it's not to say that that's unimportant, clearly a need for that and scope for that, but we weren't able to identify so much work which was focusing on some of the wider determinants that might impact on unhealthy weight, some of those wider environmental and social factors that might impact on unhealthy weight. So I'm pleased to say we've made a conscious effort as we've developed the action plan to shift that balance somewhat. So the 35 actions that we now have at various stages of development, about 2/3 of those actually focus on some of those more complex challenges, I think, around the kind of wider environmental and societal factors. And I think as the action plan is delivered over the next 3 years, we may well find that there are specific issues there that we would look to bring back to the board and to the executive groups for your insight and support around if we're encountering particularly kind of complex issues in relation to those. 2 or 3 other points, if I may, Chair, actually, just to highlight that in terms of moving forward, the HEAL Strategic Planning Group, which meets next week, will consider a proposal to form 4 subgroups, one for each of the 4 strategic themes that I touched on. We think that will be an effective mechanism, really, in terms of driving forward the delivery of each of the 4 themes and the actions that sit underneath it. We've also recently developed an action monitoring framework, which starts to kind of drill down into the actions in a bit more detail, outlines the range of partners that are likely to be able to support the delivery of particular actions, and outlines the timescale over which that'll happen. couple of other points actually, maybe just to highlight. The Heal Strategic Planning Group are able to be involved and linked with a piece of research which will take place over the next few months. Professor Alex Johnson from Aberdeen University, who's one of the HEAL SPG members, has an MSc student who will be undertaking a piece of research over the next few months, which we think will be of interest and relevance to partners. And it's a bit of research which will look at stigma and body image as it relates to healthy eating, healthy weight, and activity. So that's something we would look to kind of engage with partners on to ensure that we get the most out of that opportunity. And finally, just to highlight a couple of examples where the work that Aberdeenshire has undertaken around this agenda is increasingly being kind of linked into some of the kind of wider developments across Scotland, indeed across the wider UK, in relation to whole systems approaches to diet and healthy weight. Susan Forbes within my team, who's the lead for this strand of work, has been invited to join a new or fairly recently formed national group, actually, which has been set up by Public Health Scotland, which will look at whole systems approaches across 6 or 7 partnership areas in Scotland, actually, in relation to diet and healthy weight. So it'll be a good opportunity for Susan to kind of share the work that we're undertaking in Aberdeenshire, and equally for us to learn from the way in which other areas have approached things as well. And Susan has also been invited to present at a national event on whole systems approaches to diet and healthy weight, which is taking place tomorrow in Glasgow. So again, another good opportunity, I think, to showcase the work that's underway in Aberdeenshire, and for us to hear about the work that's taking place elsewhere. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, George. And as you say, an excellent opportunity for us to showcase and for others to learn from the good practice that you have you've got in place here. But as you say, too, that learning can come back to Aberdeenshire from other places. So thank you very much indeed. I'll take in any questions, please, for George. Clearly, Dan Shaw may well have been here if to lead on the mental well-being piece of this as well. So it's not that we're ignoring that. So if anybody has any questions, we can take a note of that and get answers back for you. I just wonder, George, and again, based on a conversation we've had elsewhere, but in terms of how we evaluate this particular priority, I note that in the report, the CPP executive agreed to progress this priority in 2021. So I think you said there was a 3-year plan.
Yes.
So at what point do we evaluate and embed the work that is has been taken forward and is being progressed? And how does this board understand what the outcomes are that have been achieved? So at what point can we say the focus on this is now embedded in day-to-day business of our teams across Aberdeenshire and perhaps beyond? I don't know if Caroline might have a view on that, but I do think that we need to perhaps look to how we can take forward that end date, if you like. But I do think February 2024 should be the time when we're looking at an evaluation and an outcome-based report. So interested in your views in that.
Yes, surely. Yes, no, you're absolutely right. It was back in 2021 that the executive and the board agreed this priority. I would say what we found was that whilst we started this process during the pandemic, it was adversely impacted to a degree, and it's really, I would say, only been over the last 6 to 9 months that we've really been able to kind of put the full weight of support from a range of partners behind it. So I would say the action plan that's in place at various stages of development, those actions, I think into next year, into 2024, we'll be able to give a fairly comprehensive progress report in terms of how those have developed, the impact that they're having, but also recognising that there will still be work that requires to be done. And I think we need to start to move into that process where we try to embed the range of actions into the core business of the range of partners that are behind the process.
That's excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Georgia. Caroline, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, George. So just to support the principle of everything that we do, if it demonstrates impact, then as partners we should be looking to understand how we mainstream it into core business, and I think that has to be a consideration up front actually when we start anything as well, because as I see it, the role of the CPP is to create the momentum and to move us forward, not to continually hold on to the work. It actually has to be embedded. So fully support that. Look forward to seeing the evaluation to understand which bits have worked and we embed and which bits require us to move forward and develop the plan for next year. Thanks.
Thank you, Caroline. That's very helpful too. Any other comments or questions? I mean, the mental health and well-being, I don't know if anyone has any input into that side of things, but perhaps we could get a briefing via Dan, based on if there was anything else that needed to be added. But I know that the mental health services are under extreme pressure across that whole system that George spoke about, and indeed community-based services are carrying many risks. And I know that the approach to supporting people with mental health issues is something that we're all coming across, all partners around this table particularly. And I do think that there's maybe a piece of work going forward. Again, happy to leave it with the executive to look at how best we can support each other and align thinking and service provision to try and to move that into a different position, because I think it's fair to say, and John and I hear about this at IJB, for example, about the risk that we're carrying around potentially unmet need and or crisis interventions and or impact on partners. So I do think that perhaps Rob, that's something that the executive might want to pick up on and get an understanding. Graham and I have had a conversation about in some time ago now, when one of the chief inspectors in the north had an interest in this side of things too, and we did start to look at a pilot project to see how best within Formartin we might be able to support each other in terms of service provision and or interventions. Unfortunately, all the players, all the leads from the different parts of the organisations have now moved on to across the piece. Actually, they've all moved on, still around, but they're all moved on to different roles. So I just wonder if what the executive view might be in terms of how we look at mental well-being and indeed mental health across the piece, how that might be something that could be looked at differently within this partnership. But happy to leave that with you, with the executive, to come back with any recommendations that you might think are appropriate. John, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I think just building on what you've said there, but linked to some of the other work that we've seen today, which is no wrong door, but there's also the capacity issues where people are very busy. I think there has been quite a bit of chat around trauma-informed work. There's the mental health issues. So there's a number of these strands which in isolation all make sense, but coming back to busy day-to-day people, how they can identify it and then feed it into the system. I think if the executive can have a think about maybe a pilot that can work out how that might be done efficiently, otherwise we'll continually to talk about it, year after year without actually getting into it. So it's maybe just to add to what you're saying there is the mental health aspect, but there's a theme there as well. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Anybody, any other comments or questions for George or to pass on to other colleagues? No, so the recommendation on our report then is to consider and comment on the progress made to date. But thank you very much, George, to you and your colleagues. And I think please pass on our thanks and congratulations to Susan for being recognised as being at the forefront of the work nationally. I think that's really quite significant. So please pass on our thanks and congratulations to Susan and colleagues for that. And no doubt if there's anything that comes out of our national work, we'll hear of it in due course. So number of issues there for the executive to have a look at. In terms of the HEAL, it's about the evaluation and about looking at embedding and how we go forward with that. And as Caroline said and put very well, this partnership should not hold on to things where it can be embedded and taken forward as day-to-day business. So we look forward to that in beginning of 2024, because that would be the appropriate time to come back here. And also ask the executive to look at how we take forward a collective and cohesive partnership understanding and arrangements where we can perhaps align services in terms of mental well-being, how we look at that early intervention and preventative work, and how best we can support each other. Because we've all got the same issues, I suspect, in different measures. So, and John has suggested looking at perhaps a pilot project if anyone has any ideas of what that might look like. Happy to support that, but we'll hear back from the executive in due course. So thank you very much indeed for that, and thank you, George. We'll go back to item 6 on the agenda, and thank you very much, Amanda, for joining us for this report. And it'll be over to yourself now, looking at reducing poverty, and just hand over to you, Amanda. Thank you very much. And for those who perhaps don't know, Amanda is Area Manager in Buchan, but also leads on tackling poverty and inequalities. Thank you, Amanda, amongst other things, I'm sure. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Chair, and my apologies for dipping into this meeting just before you hear the report, but it was really helpful to hear Georgie's update, because I think there are definitely some synergies between the priorities and some of what we're doing. So as ever, the report in front of you is both highlighting some of the achievements over the last 3-4 months, but also seeking some direction from you. So just in terms of the achievements, we have had our Child Poverty Action Plan for the period 2022 to 2026 approved. That's the statutory report that the duty is on ourselves as Aberdeenshire Council and NHS Grampian. However, as a community planning partnership, we do that across all our partners. So although it is approved by our Communities Committee and our NHS Board, we have all partners around that to ensure it is looking at the key issues we face. We have also recently been given approval through our Education and Children's Services Committee to look at undertaking some research to allow us to find ways of developing our out-of-school childcare approaches. One of the key things we hear when we go around our area committees, when we go around our partners, when we talk to our employers, is that criticality of flexible, accessible childcare to supporting people get back into work or retain roles, perhaps take on additional hours if that's what they wish to do. And it is a real challenge. It's a real challenge both in terms of attracting people into the sector, but it's also a real challenge ensuring that there is the right type of childcare available to suit all those different approaches that people need. So our report was recently taken to our Education and Children's Services Committee in Aberdeenshire, and that committee has agreed that we can work collectively with partners. In particular, we're working with our economic development colleagues, we're working with our employability colleagues, we're working with our education and childcare colleagues, but right across our Tackling Poverty and Inequalities partnership, to look at how we can take forward research to then build a sustainable approach to childcare. So I think that's a really exciting piece of work that we will have ongoing over the coming months, and we'll certainly keep the board up to date with that. A number of partners are involved in developing the tender for that research to ensure that it is meeting the needs across the board and recognising the differences in the kind of urban and rural aspects of Aberdeenshire. We've also had our funding for projects confirmed through our Communities Committee, and I have attached the funding at Appendix 2, and just picking up on the discussion that George has had with you all in relation to the Health Eating Active Lives and the mental well-being approach. I would probably just like to draw attention to that framework and the indicative funding that we have associated with key areas that help also take forward the priority that George and Dan Shaw from AVA lead. There's obviously funding supporting that food security, and that's really key, I think, around that healthy eating piece, is being able to ensure that our families, particularly those who are experiencing financial insecurity, have got the ability to access really good quality food, but at lower costs. So there are a number of funding streams in there that are supporting that. In particular, we are also supporting the Fair Food Aberdeenshire partnership, which I know is supporting the Health Eating Active Lives priority. And also in relation to wellbeing, there is funding identified to support that mental wellbeing piece. We already do have some projects underway, but just recognising the NHS board's call to have that embedding and that mainstreaming. I do think that if we're looking at that, there is funding there within tackling poverty and inequalities to try and support some of that mental health, mental wellbeing piece. So perhaps we can work together via the CPP executive to look at how we can be supporting that, because it's so key to both the priorities that the board have set. We've also been successful with the rollout of our Loves Local Aberdeenshire gift card. That is through funding that we received from the Scottish Government, specifically designed to help our businesses recover from COVID, but also to support our low-income families. So the idea of the Loves Local gift card was we supplied it to families in receipt of council tax reduction, allowed those families to have a cash first approach, but also we have over 350 businesses now in Aberdeenshire that accept that card. We have more than Edinburgh, quite proud of that, but it really does allow families across Aberdeenshire to access food, health, beauty, whatever it is they feel they need at that time, they've got easy access to it. And certainly it's quite supportive of the approach the Scottish Government have now announced, which is they're looking to end food banks. That is something that I know our local food providers, the Trussell Trust and others, have been really keen to see. We want to see an end to food banks. That is not the best way to approach food sustainability. And this kind of cash first approach that we have used with our Loves Local Aberdeenshire card has shown that that is a good way to work. We now use it through our Financial Inclusion Partnership, and anecdotal feedback from our colleagues in the ASAT team, which support the Scottish Welfare Fund, is they are seeing a reduction in some of those crisis grants coming through, because we're able to do a little bit of prevention and early intervention with these cards. So we're now looking at what does that mean for us longer term, and how can we maybe use that to go forward and take the pressure off that Scottish Welfare Fund. So those are our kind of key achievements, but I would also like to draw the board's attention to paragraphs 4.3. We have had some informal feedback on our recent local action report. That's the report that we prepare each year, which tells everyone how we have done in terms of delivering our child poverty action plan. So it looks back at what we've achieved, but it also looks forward and allows us the opportunity to be agile and respond to changing circumstances and reform some of our priorities as we need to be tackling poverty where we most need to. So the feedback that we've had does give us positives. So there is a strategic approach, we've got local actions, we understand what will have the greatest impact. However, it does give us areas for improvement. We need to get better at the use of policy levers, particularly around that economic development piece and potentially around planning. And we need to be better at demonstrating the contributions of all of our partners. So showcasing more of what our partners are doing, and showing how that is leading to change, and helping us reduce poverty. So I'd be really keen to get a sense from the board. We have taken this into our Tackling Poverty and Inequality Strategic Partnership, and we've got partners around the table who are reviewing the report and how we do it. But I'd be really keen to get the board's steer on anything they feel we should be looking at and that we can further develop, perhaps in particular that use of policy levers, and we might see us using those policy levers to make that long-term sustainable difference.
Thank you very much indeed, Amanda, and I'm delighted that your approval is there for your Child Poverty Action Plan, and the funding has been agreed, so that's excellent. And also there's some really good feedback from the Scottish Poverty and Inequalities Research Unit as well, working in partnership with you. But clearly the challenges are there for you and for everyone else. So Mark, please, Councillor Findlater.
Yes, thank you, Chair, for that really interesting, Amanda. Thank you. And one bit that I was wanting to maybe delve a bit further into, and I'll go back and read those papers again through Education and Children's Services. Very much needed, I think, research into developing our out-of-school childcare. Much needed, I think. And I'm glad that Education and Children's Services Committee has agreed to collectively work with partners through employability and economic development. I think getting people back into work with everything that we're going through. My question is really: is there a gap within the sort of childcare workforce within there? Is there something that can be done through foundation workshops, for example? Sorry, the foundation apprenticeships. And what next? What kind of outcomes? I'm pinching the chair's sort of words, the what next sort of thing.
What?
The so what, that's it, the so what, but it's the time frame involved, and would be specifically looking for funding to kind of help these out of school practices so that they can help our folk. Is that the kind of mindset behind it? You know, if you can maybe fill that a bit more out, Amanda. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, yes, thank you for that, Councillor Findlater, and really good questions, because there is a gap, that is part of the challenge. There's a real gap in the workforce. It's not a part of the economy that we see growing. Some of that is about how it is viewed. It's not always seen as valuable. It can be seen as quite expensive, so families struggle with the cost of childcare. Therefore, our child providers struggle with the costs of paying the reasonable wages. They are looking to pay minimum wage, real life wage as well. So it is an area that we struggle with. We are in fact in your patch in Banff, we are working at it. Employability colleagues are working alongside the area manager and others there to look at a kind of childcare academy approach to try and grow it, particularly around childminders, because they often can offer the most flexible arrangements that families are looking for, but that's not going to be the only arrangement. So we do have that pilot underway within Banff, because it was a particular issue there. And we do have funding within Tackling Poverty and Inequalities to be able to do those tests of change and to try and grow them. And that's the reason for undertaking the research, is to help us identify all the different models that we can look at, and then have that ability through our employability colleagues. Paul has now left, so he won't be able to pick up on it, but I'm very aware the employability team, which sits within Paul's part of the service, they have recently received funding through Scottish Government for child poverty coordinators, and that's to support those who are wanting to come back into work. And some of what they're doing is working alongside this approach to try and build that childcare pipeline of employment, as well as supporting parents who need it. So there is funding there. So we're looking at how can we use that funding to encourage providers to come through, to give them grants to help give them some incentives to look at how they might do it. We recognise it will be different for each area and for each settlement, and we need to work with our employers as well, because they are part of this. But I'm more than happy to pull together a briefing on that approach, so what the research will be looking to cover and what funding we've put around it and the timeframes, because our Education and Children's Services Committee were very clear that we can't withdraw from anything. So as a local authority, we couldn't withdraw from settings until we know there is an alternative for those families who really do need that provision.
Okay, Councillor Findlater.
Come back in briefly
Yeah,
with that
of
one,
course.
Chair.
Yeah.
Really supportive of that. That's brilliant, Amanda. And just to flesh that out a bit more, and you took the words out of my mouth. A wee briefing there to us. So I think that would be really valuable and interesting thing to all partners here. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much indeed. So that will be an action, Finlay. Amanda will provide a briefing and that will be circulated to all partners. That would be very, very helpful. As you say, Paul has left the building, so to speak, Paul McCarry, and I think a lot of your asks are actually around that economic development piece. And again, the governance aspect from different partners, so that's all partners around the strategic development and scrutiny. So I almost hesitate, but not quite, to ask the executive to have a look at that. And I do think that that's a piece of work that should also come back with some recommendations as to how we go forward on that basis, because at 4.3 and the 2 bullet points there are going to be key going forward. And I just wonder as well, in terms of that economic piece, if that's something that, I mean, I'm not sure if you were involved, Amanda, or saw the regional economic strategy as it was being produced from Tackling Poverty and Inequalities piece. No, that paper is going to, just for everybody, there's a paper on the regional economic strategy going to full council on the 29th of January. So can somebody please, or you'll be able to access it, Amanda, it's not in the public domain, of course, but if you could ask Mr. McCarry for a copy of that draft. And I know it's not giving you a lot of time, but certainly it gives you an opportunity to, I'm happy to take any comments that you might have and or I'm asked to speak to it at council. But it's the 29th of June that there'll be, is that right? Yeah, it is coming this time, I think, to full council, Amanda, and there's an opportunity for you to feed into that, and also anything I can do to help to feed into that, be most I'd be happy to do that on the day. So, but I think Rob, if you could take this away as well and look at the executive how best we can enhance governance information and expand on the respective contributions of different partners, strategic development and scrutiny, particularly that aspect of it. And we can remit to Paul, I think, the other bit of that, Amanda, to come back and inform us how that might be taken forward. So I think we'll need a report back on that at the same time as the executive feedback on the other aspect of it. Okay, Mr. Simpson. Sorry, executive are going to be busy. I think that would be helpful. Is there anything else you want us to pick up, Amanda?
No, that's been really helpful. Thanks, Chair.
Not at all. And certainly happy to follow up with Mr. McCarry as well if you need me to. So again, the offer is there also around that mental health and wellbeing piece. Amanda has said there is funding within the action plan. So again, George, if that's something that is of interest to you, then a conversation with Amanda, I'm sure would be helpful, and perhaps Graham and Caroline might want to have a chat about that as well, how best that feeds into their agendas as well. Okay. Okay, so with that then, the recommendations are at section 2, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and that is there for our approval. We have given direction and we've identified, we've acknowledged the achievements, which I think are exceptional. Been asked to identify any changes or improvement within the area of work. I think that may come at the next iteration, Amanda, when we look at those governance issues, etc. But Amanda and Annette Johnson and the small team that are there, I have to say, and I keep saying it, but I will keep saying it, they do an exceptional piece of work. In conjunction with so many partners. They work across national agendas, regional and local agendas, and actually achieve a huge amount. And that lived experience forum is absolutely invaluable, I think, to all of us. And if you, through your different organisations, don't have access to that lived forum and those lived experience voices, I think it's something that might be of interest to you in the future. So it's absolutely crucial that we listen to people and how they're managing and experience things as they are at the minute. Okay, so with that, thank you very much indeed, Amanda. I really appreciate your time. Thank you. We'll move then to item 8, which is the financial strategy for 2023-24. And Fiona, you're going to take us through that, please.
Well, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, partners. So partners will remember that the finance report was considered by board at its meeting in March. The discussion at that meeting highlighted the underspend during the year 22-23, and the board requested that the executive develop a spending strategy for the current year to provide assurance and reduce risk of future underspend. The executive met on the 5th of May and considered different options around the community planning budget, and it was agreed to propose to the board that partners could submit bids for funding for projects that support delivery of community planning in Aberdeenshire and align with our objectives and priorities. Proposals would be submitted to the board for consideration and agreement or otherwise. Updates in terms of spending would be provided together with the impact that the project or projects are having or will have on our communities and how that's being demonstrated. In advance of the meeting today, partners have already been asked to provide any suitable projects for funding, and a couple of bids have been received from area managers to deliver place plans for Martin and Kincardine and Mearns areas. These are the two administrative areas in Aberdeenshire which are not currently progressing place plans, with projects already currently underway in Fraserburgh, as we heard earlier on, with the shaping places for wellbeing, Inverurie, Peterhead and Huntly. So the board is just requested to consider the viability of the proposed financial strategy and also the request from area managers around place plans. Thank you, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Fiona. That's an excellent introduction. Do members have any questions? Are we content that the proposals for the strategy are viable and sustainable? See nods of agreement. And given that there are two area managers who've submitted bids for funding for Martin and Kincardine and Mearns, are we content to support those bids? Agreed? That's agreed, Fiona. So both the approach and the two bids have been approved.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You had a verbal update in the community safety proposal, Fiona. I'm not sure if that's still if it's absolutely ready to be here, but I'll ask you to introduce that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, from the report that was considered at the last meeting of the board around delegations and representations, there was a proposal to strengthen the links between community planning and community safety. The board members had requested that the executive should consider governance arrangements and look at what that relationship might look like in practical terms, with one of the options being regular reporting from the Community Safety Strategic Group to this board, really similar to the current reporting arrangements for the LOIP updates, bearing in mind, of course, that community safety will become embedded in place plans and reported accordingly when those are in place. I've had a couple of conversations with the chair of the Community Safety Strategy Steering Group, who will be taking this proposal to that group when it meets later on this month. And it was really just to update the board that a report will be brought back to the board in September, setting out the position of the Community Safety Group and proposing future direction. Thank you, Chair.
Perfect, thank you. And just for members, I've had the conversation at the chair of the Strategic Partnerships request with herself and Mr. Wood, the director which covers the service, housing service, where this sits, and would echo Fiona's comments. But I think there's some discussion to be had within the partnership, strategic partnership, just to make sure that all partners are still committed and have the capacity to do what they're doing currently. So there will be a report comes back to September, so that's most welcome. Thank you. Mark, please.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that report coming back. I'll maybe get a briefing or whatever in the future, because obviously I do see a problem, I think, with a lot of the community safety groups across Aberdeenshire, their capacity, etc. Because like every other sort of volunteer organisations after COVID and lockdown, they are suffering, and actually trying to get membership up and going. So I'd be interested in how that part of the whole thing, that the volunteer part of the community safety element, is going to be taken on board, because volunteers are gold dust, and we've got to make sure that they are still engaged and have the appropriate projects as well to push forward. And it's not just being there as sort of cash cows for different organisations, but actually developing and putting projects forward in unison across Aberdeenshire and through the plan. So it'd be interesting in September when that comes through, Chair. Thank you.
My understanding is that there's only one group still active. There were 7, there's now only 1 that are active in that respect.
Oh, well, the Bamford district one's still active, so that's 2.
Okay, that's 2. Well, it was 1 or 2. I said 1, but there you go, it's 2. But that's all. There are only the 2. Yeah. Okay, so a further report come back in September, but all conversations are ongoing, and I have asked the chair to make sure that she speaks to all partners on the basis that, you know, there's still the format that exists is still appropriate, and if not, what do we do around all of that? So that will be discussed with your colleagues at that partnership. Okay, Fiona, thank you very much indeed for that. Does anyone have any other business? I don't see anybody indicating. So on that basis, then we'll close the meeting. The next meeting's on the 13th of September. There are some briefings and things that will come out in between times, but we'll, for the moment, conclude. I'd like to thank you all very much indeed for your attendance and participation today. I think there's been some really interesting presentations and discussions, and we'll follow up on all of the actions that have been recorded from today, and we'll hear through Mr. Simpson from the executive. If there's anything in particular or any exceptions, then please flag that up, Rob, and we can deal with that as we go through. But I'd like to thank particularly our guests who have presented. I'd like to thank Anne for coming along, and very much appreciate your time, but would be very keen as well maybe to catch up before September. If we can get a catch up. Yeah, that would be great.
I'm very conscious that my background is actually Tiree and not Aberdeenshire. I will seek to remedy that for the next meeting. So
you could be in rural Buchanan for all we know.
Well, I could be. I've got some lovely pictures of Stonehaven. I'm sure I could find.
Oh, there you go. But the rural piece fits as well, so it's very welcome. But
thanks for that.
Fiona, maybe you could set up some time with Anne before we meet again in September. That'd be great.
No problem.
Okay. Thank you all very much indeed. Much appreciated. Thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.